Go Condition 1. Corporal Mudd here. I'd like to start this off by thanking God for the ideas for this story and this video. Battle of Dimensions, Part 2. Memories. 6 months earlier. I looked out the back of the 7-ton at the hills we were passing through. I preferred to view what was going on around me, so I would take the scenic seat if I could. Usually looking out at what we were passing through would normally put me at ease, but today my insides felt like they were tied in a knot. I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was going to happen. We had been riding along a pot-filled road, or what was left of a pot-filled road, for a while. We were the spear tip to assault what Intel said was a Chinese research location. I looked around at the other Marines in the back. None of them showed any signs of concern. Everyone was conversing amongst each other except Lance Corporal Riley and myself. Riley was sitting across from me by the 7-ton hatch. She was racked out with her chin resting on her flak. Riley was from southern Ohio, around the Cincinnati area. Ironically not too far from where I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky. She was above average in height for a female, and she was only a few inches shorter than I was. On a bad day, I measured at 6'1". She kept her dark brown hair pulled back into a tight braided bun. I have no idea how she managed that in the field, but she was someone who always found a way to get things done. She had lightly tanned skin and a few freckles on her face. We had gone to boot camp together, and we definitely didn't start off on the right foot. I made a dumb comment and underestimated her, and ended up getting a pretty bad beating from it. Learning firsthand that she could fight had not been fun. We eventually got a mutual respect and tolerance for each other. However, we couldn't wait to get away from each other as well. After Parris Island, we went to combat training in North Carolina. Her and I became guides of our respective platoons, and the rivalry between our platoons was something else. Even the instructors got involved in it. Though she whooped me at boot camp, I beat her in front of the entire company at MCT. Granted, she was exhausted from staying up all night looking for and cleaning their platoon guidon that my squad leaders and I tactically acquired and hid. I did get jumped later for that stunt, but my platoon mates came to my aid. When we finished combat training, we were being told where we were going next. Riley's and my name were called, and they told us we were going to Fort Lost in the Woods. Neither of us had known each other's MOS because we never really talked to each other unless we absolutely had to. When our names were announced, I received a death glare from Riley. We even had seats next to each other on every leg of the trip to the state of misery. After several hours of awkward silence, I finally apologized and we came to terms to start with a clean slate. When we got to Leonardwood, we stuck together since we really didn't know anyone else, and because of that, we formed a strong friendship. Riley and I finished in the top 3 Marines of our class. I finished second, while she finished third. I beat her by 0.1%. Our rivalry was still there. It had simply evolved to a healthier one. During the schoolhouse, we regularly asked to get the same orders. Sure enough, when orders came in, we both got the 31st meal on Guam. When the war started, we had been together in Pendleton, getting a crash course on our adjustment to Intel. The Marine Corps had determined that Seaburn's personnel and responsibilities would be divided up. A small number would remain Seaburn, teaching classes to the masses, and that would be the GT pool's lower end. GT was a scoreline on the entrance test that said how well you could learn. The higher the score, the better. The Seaburn hazmat resources and platoon personnel would go to EOD and would be from the mid to higher end of the GT pool. Some who could get the clearance and meet the qualifications would go to Intel, and that would be from the GT pool's higher end. The war put most of those plans on hold, and the Seaburn personnel that were going to EOD or Intel were put together to become modified Intel gathering platoons. We became the redheaded stepchild. We were no longer true Seaburn and weren't full Intel. We were expendable frontline muscle to fill the gaps as the Corps trained legit Intel personnel. No one other than Riley and myself had any official training in Intel gathering, though our platoon did a good job compared to the others. Riley and I had been put in the same squad and fire team to maximize our capabilities. She would have been promoted around the same time as me, but she told our lieutenant that he was a moron and she was not recommended or non-rec for promotion. When our LT bought the farm and our platoon received a new one, he sat down with Riley and told her that he recommended her for promotion. So we were expecting her to be promoted on the 1st of next month, though I was almost certain when she got promoted that she would probably be moved to another fire team, which was unfortunate because she became my calming element and helped me stay level-headed, especially now that we had Sergeant Roberts in our platoon. I had only heard bad things about him through the underground, also known as Scuttlebutt. Word was he was a suck-up and would throw anyone under the bus to make himself look better. The making of a great future staff NCO. Word was he got Corporal Mac, my first NCO, paralyzed from the waist down by not paying attention as he was operating the vehicle. As I was looking out the back in deep thought, Riley screamed, "Duke!" snapping me out of my trance. Everyone went silent and looked at Riley. She had shot up straight, but had a 1,000-yard stare and looked straight through me. After a few seconds, her eyes went wide, and a second later she leaned over the back of the 7-ton and puked. I thought to myself, that was weird. It's not every day that you have your best friend wake up yelling your name. "Rah! Let's go, Riley!" LJ yelled. All the Marines in the back started yelling and cheering Riley on as she continued to puke. I thought to myself, I love Marines. There's never a boring day, especially when your team gets put on a truck with a bunch of ground pounders. I looked over to Lance Corporal Hill. He was laughing along with the rest of the ground pounders. So far, he was managing pretty well for his first mission. He was like LJ, but skinnier and a little taller. Hill was from around DC. If I had to say something negative about him, it was that he never stopped talking about the beautiful capital and how much he missed his nightly walks and drives around the monuments. I thought to myself, though he may be a bit annoying about it, he does have a good point about those nighttime walks and drives. Doing that sounds real nice. He seemed like a good kid. He was very respectful and knowledgeable, though he still had a while till I fully trusted him. But I knew he was competent enough to do his job. I looked back at Riley, and she was drinking from one of her canteens. She met my gaze, and then she shuddered and quickly looked away. I thought to myself, that's pretty weird. Must have been one heck of a dream. I asked Riley, "So, do you dream of me often?" Riley looked at me and shuddered again, and quickly looked away. She remained silent for a few moments till she replied, "You would hope for that, wouldn't you, Mud?" Well, yes. But now I don't have to worry about it, because I finally know that you think about me even when you sleep, and it makes me feel all warm and fuzzy inside. She gave me a weak smile, then turned her 1,000-yard stare to the passing landscape. Normally she would have at least tried to make some sort of retort to what I said. I made eye contact with LJ, and he gave me a quizzical look while gesturing with his head at Riley. I shook my head and gestured that I didn't know. LJ shrugged and tapped on Riley's shoulder, and she jumped, nearly falling out of the truck. But thanks to LJ, she didn't. I thought to myself again, oh yeah, something is 100% wrong. And I asked Riley, "You good?" "Yeah, I am." "LJ, don't ever startle me like that. Ever again." Riley replied as she stared him down. "Hey," he said as he put his hands up. "I just wanted to ask if you were okay, and if you wanted to talk. That's all." "Maybe later, Jenkins, but not right now. I'm still trying to process what I... Never mind," Riley answered as he trailed off and went back into deep thought. LJ met my gaze again and gave me another concerned look. I gestured back to him that I didn't know, but to give her time. She didn't say a word for the rest of the ride. She simply stared off into the distance. My insides tensed up into a tighter ball the longer we rode. I thought to myself, this isn't good. After another half an hour or so, the trucks finally stopped, and we dismounted. As planned, we were about 2 kilometers away from the facility. Our southern approach was covered from view by the 2 large hills and woods to the facility's southeast. The main force gathered behind the 4 light armored vehicles in the convoy's front, and were going to press up the road while the flanking group would go into the tree line and up the southern hill designated Hill Charlie. Once in position, the flanking group would wait for the main force to pull the detention of the facility's defenses. I thought to myself, divide and conquer. The main group's designation was Thunder. It consisted of 2 platoons of ground pounders, 2 dog handlers, and the 4 LAVs. I thought to myself, the LAVs were old, but still very lethal. Though, sooner or later, this old gear would catch up with us. The flanking group's designation was Trainwrecker. It had a reinforced infantry platoon, 4 teams of scout snipers, and our 2 squads of Seaburn. There were 2 more squads of ground pounders that were staying back to guard the Vics. For nearby support, we had an Army tank battalion about 10 clicks away to our east. We had artillery support to our south, and according to the Lance Underground, we supposedly had a flight of A-11 Super Hogs, or Warthog 2s, close by. A-11s were simply a newer, better version of the A-10. Even though there was the rumor, I doubted that we would actually get support from them, seeing this was a research gathering mission, and Command was always so worried about damaging the research and development that we could potentially gather. I got it, the Chinese had some advanced research and development, more so than what we expected them to have, but it's not like they could field it in large numbers. I disagreed with the highest risk-reward decision of the situation. The worst part was the Chinese knew that we were looking for this research, so it was extremely common to walk into traps during research gathering missions, and our command either didn't know or didn't care. I didn't know which option I preferred. They both sucked. I understood that this is war, but they acted so predictable that we almost always walked into a trap. I hated my officers so much, especially after changing us from warrant officers to only commissioned officers a year ago. Warrant officers were enlisted officers. They outranked regular enlisted, but were outranked themselves by commissioned officers. Commissioned officers were super intelligent, but they lacked common sense. So much so that it always cost us lives on our end, and they were never on missions with us. I thought to myself, it's hard to earn trust if you never lead or don't know how to. Though, our new LT showed promise. Officers aside, what had me worried the most with our leadership of this mission was the new sergeant that we had in our platoon, Sergeant Roberts. He was filling in for my regular sergeant, Sergeant Finley. Finley had been sent stateside on emergency leave to go to his brother's funeral, who had died earlier this week in combat. I understood why he did it. I knew that if my brother bought the farm, I wanted to go see him home too. Now that aside, I was not happy with Roberts being put over me, even though I was Finley's number 2. My brother, William Montgomery Duke, served on the USS Avenger as the weapons officer. The Avenger was a Titan-class battlecruiser. These ships were massive, sitting at 1,200 feet long. Each ship could produce more than double the electricity that the Gerald R. Ford-class carriers could. It carried 2 Mark 50 heavy railguns, 4 Mark 20 light railguns, a dozen direct energy platforms, and countless more conventional defensive and offensive platforms. It was supposed to be able to take its own broadside and keep going. Its armor pattern was heavily classified along with its propulsion system that made them the fastest ships in the fleet. Most other information on the Titan class was also highly classified, but it was publicly known that it was the heaviest armed and most advanced warship in the world. If something happened to my brother, then something awful happened, and the Navy was in a world of hurt. Unfortunately for my platoon, the odds of something terrible happening were much higher. And those odds got worse when Roberts filled in for Finley. Now, that was only if my information was accurate, and I'm pretty sure it was. And I thought to myself, today was going to be bad. I just knew it. This is the end of part 2. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, and I'll be trying to get out part 3 as soon as possible. God bless you, thank you, and this is Corporal Mudd, out.